All right, today I want to talk about Philip Dick's only publication from 1958, as far as I can tell, Null-O. It's a story that you can find in the third volume of his collected works, Second Variety. It has other titles too. It depends on the publisher and the edition that comes out, but my version is the one with the Second Variety on the cover. Now, this is an interesting period in Philip K. Dick's career, 1958. He only publishes one thing, and this is coming after years in which he published dozens of things every year, especially 1953 and 1954. And 1955 was a pretty prolific year too. And then he slowed down and he stopped writing short stories. As I talked about in my last video, The Unreconstructed M was the last story he would write for a long time. Now, the way the collected stories arrange these stories is based on when they were submitted to the editor. So this story, Null-O, although published in 1958, was actually written way back in 1958. Sorry, 1953. Written in 1953. It was written around the same time as stories like Tony and the Beetle, uh, Exhibit Piece, To Serve the Master, and Last of the Masters. Some really great stories by him, so it was a prolific time when he was writing, but this was one that never got published for whatever reason. The agent had it, but couldn't get it published for what, I don't know why. It's not the best story he wrote, and maybe that's why. It's a bit odd, and it doesn't really have a plot so much as it's more of an idea put on, loosely fictionalized idea. So it took 5 years to get published, which, some of these stories took a while to get out there, but this one took particularly a long time, and it wasn't really published till Dick had already kind of given up or stopped writing short stories. Now, what is he doing in his career? Well, he's starting to shift his focus. He will publish Time Out of Joint in 1959, which is a really great novel and really one of his kind of a novel that's already kind of beyond the turn of his career when he starts getting more philosophical, starts talking more about shifting realities, and starts to write really great novels. In the 1960s, I think Time Out of Joint is one of his first really great ones. I like Eye in the Sky too, but Time Out of Joint is kind of a step up in a lot of ways from that story, that novel. After that, he'll publish two novels, Dr. Futurity and Vulcan's Hammer, which are really kind of old-style Dick novels. They have a lot more in common with The World Jones Made and Solar Lauder and some of his earlier stories. In fact, Vulcan's Hammer was his first one he wrote, the first science fiction novel he wrote. After this, he's going to write The Man in the High Castle and then The Simulacrum and other great novels that will really define his career in the mid-60s. So this is kind of just a kind of a nadir of his career, but it's a nadir because he's really shifting his focus and trying to write different things. So it's a throwback story to an earlier part of his career. So what goes on in Null-O, this story? Well, essentially we have a young man named Lemuel, who his parents are worried about him because he can't make friends and he's been fighting a lot. And in fact, he got in a fight at a baseball game because he refused to play by the rules, and the other kids beat him up. And this is the event that kind of forces his parents to come to terms with who he is, and they send him to the doctor. He has a lot of characteristics that I think parents now might say, well, maybe my kid's on the autism spectrum, right? Maybe he has Asperger's or something. Dick doesn't go there with this. Now, Dick was very interested in autism. In the novel Martian Time Slip, he has a whole character, a young man, who has autism, and he conceives of autism as being sort of out of time. That's not how Lemuel is eventually diagnosed, though. He's diagnosed by the doctor, who's named North, as the perfect paranoid, and then he's institutionalized, and North and Lemuel begin to develop a theory and a project to kind of fulfill his ideas. Now, what happens at the interview between the doctor and Lemuel is Lemuel basically confesses that not only does he think the rules of baseball are arbitrary, he also thinks that all human morality is an arbitrary lie. And this really fascinates the doctor, and this is what encourages him to study him more and take him in. And they start to work on this project, which is called Null-O. So Null-O is used as kind of the project, the ultimate goal of this, but also it's used in the story to refer to this class of scientists and thinkers who reject arbitrary rules and distinctions. Now, the ultimate goal of the Null-O is to create a universal gestalt, first of humanity, then of Earth, then of the solar system, and eventually the universe. And the project for doing this is to create a series of bombs that are increasingly powerful that achieve this goal of Gestalt at each level. So the ultimate would be the U-bomb, which would destroy the universe. But the first one would be like the C-bomb, which is going to destroy most of humanity, except for a few of these scientists and a few others. Then there's going to be the E-bomb, which will do this to the Earth, on and on and on. So this is the project. And they actually get pretty far in it. So the story jumps ahead in time, and we actually see all of Lemuel's life covered. He just sort of dies at the end. He's not really much of a character. He's just there as a device to fulfill this idea. So after the C-bomb is destroyed, I think something like 3,000 humans are left on... The C-bomb is detonated, and there's about 3,000 humans left on Earth. Many of these are industrialists who escape to below the surface with a working class to sustain kind of their old way of life. So resistance comes through them. Eventually, they're able to form enough of a resistance that the scientists, the Null-O scientists, have to flee to Venus, where they continue on their great project. And that's essentially the story that we get. So I really only have three things I want to say about this story in terms of what we can make of it. One is there seems to be a criticism of the technocracy. This idea that there's a class of people who, because of an idea they have about what utopia can be, are capable of implementing something that's beneficial for most people. In this case, it's disastrous. It destroys most of humanity and will eventually destroy the universe because of a bad idea they have. And that a bad idea is that distinctions don't matter and that we're all basically one common soul, and that getting us to that undifferentiated state is an advantage. And it all comes out of, it starts with a young boy who probably is bad at baseball, doesn't have any friends, and comes to the idea that I don't have to enjoy playing baseball with my friends because I think the rules of baseball are arbitrary and stupid. And so that bad idea is then the seed that germinates other bad ideas, which ultimately become a whole perverse subculture of scientists who believe their ultimate goal of all science is a universal being, which is achieved through violence. So that is the core idea. Now, yeah, most technocrats don't have such bizarre ideas in their heads, but what they do share is a belief that humanity is there to be managed on behalf of by others, that others know best, right? That whether they're the corporate elite or whether they're the ivory tower intellectuals or they're scientists, they think they have the answers to all sorts of social problems. And there's a lot of examples throughout history of technocrats coming to these ideas and then achieving them. The prison is one example, the asylum, all the stuff Foucault wrote about. But there are other examples we can point to. The urban planner is something that Dick really was bothered by a lot. He wrote again and again about urban planning, in The Commuter, in Cosmic Puppets, in Small Town, and on and on. So these are a class of people who think they know best. And Dick is certainly criticizing that whole project in this story. I guess another theme related to this is the psychopathy involved in seeing the world too objectively and ignoring differences and subjectivities and just being... this is something Dick plays with a lot in his ideas. Like, the person who lacks empathy is someone who's not human in his mind, right? And this is the problem with kind of robots in a lot of his stories, is that they lack this empathy, right? And even when humans seem to lack this empathy, like you see in We Can Build You, that's the name of the novel. There's this, human beings are capable of being so psychopathic and so schizoid that they're not capable of appreciating human emotions at all. And then they become basically like, they lose their humanity. And that's what he wrote about often in his robot stories. And here you have the Null-O, these scientists essentially functioning as robots, seeing the world completely objectively and then doing horrible things because of that. Now, what do we make of the industrialist class? Well, in a way, they're just reactionaries. They don't really have an alternative. Yeah, they're able to achieve some resistance and hold back the Null-O's plan for a while. But at the end of the day, they're just reactionaries who want a working class that they can oppress. Where does our hope really come? And Dick tells us towards the end of the story. He says, quote, The lower forms of life, clerks, bus drivers, day laborers, typists, janitors, tailors, bakers, turret lathe operators, shipping clerks, baseball players, radio announcers, garage mechanics, policemen, necktie peddlers, ice cream vendors, door-to-door salesmen, bill collectors, receptionists, welders, carpenters, construction laborers, farmers, politicians, merchants, the men and women whose very existence terrified the Null-O to their core." End quote. So this is the vast, differentiated common folk that Dick sees as the true resistance to the Null-O's plan. So diversity is the alternative to Gestalt. And that's a good thing. And now, how does this society of differentiated common folk manage and function and work? Well, it works. The clue is in that he mentions baseball players again. And we're supposed to think back to the original scene where Lemuel is beaten up during the baseball game because he refused to play by the rules. Well, how does a baseball game work? Because you have all these different position players who they're not always mutually distinguishable and replaceable. And yeah, there are utility infielders and things, but most often a first baseman can't be thrown in shortstop and play well. So they all have their own function and their own role, and they're all playing as individuals. They all care about their own batting average. So how does baseball work? Well, it's because of an agreed upon set of rules. And this is how our society functions. Right? We agree on a set of rules. It's very much like Rousseau's idea of a social contract, that we make the social contract with each other and we agree to abide by certain rules of society. And that's how we get fulfilled in meaning in our life in a society, is by accepting these commonly agreed upon rules. It's not that we make a deal with some abstract authority. We make this deal with each other. And that's sort of where Dick is coming to here, I think. And in a sense, order comes through diversity rather than the Null-O idea, which is to create order through the project of a utopian technocratic class. Now, do we see any examples of this in world history? Yes, I think we do. Not only the different projects of the technocracy, but in the nation state itself. As many scholars and thinkers about the nation state have identified, really what the nation state is doing is taking one culture, usually a high culture, from one region and imposing it across the boundaries of a nation. In France, you had all these regional cultures and dialects and languages and traditions, but through the public school and through the military and through the bureaucracy, a common culture is imposed on everyone. And we've seen this again and again in the nation-building project, the main tool of which has been education. And education itself, mass public education, is another kind of device and imagination of the technocracy. Right? Let's create undifferentiated mass that can perform any function we want. We'll do it by creating a common curriculum for everyone that everyone has to accept. Dick seems to be resisting this whole project of the technocracy. And I think that's what makes this story valuable to us. Now, it's not the easiest to read. It's not very fun. I can understand why it wasn't published for so long, that it's a bit odd and it needed some work. I think Dick could have done this story a lot better had he come back to it and tried to revise it. But instead we got this. We basically got it as it was originally penned back in 1953. But nevertheless, it's a useful story to look at, and I think it has lessons for us today. So that's it. So Dick's sole publication of 1958, Null-O. You can find it in the third volume of the collected stories, and probably maybe some other anthologies. I don't know. I don't have them. So that's it. I'll be back next time with some more reviews by Philip Dick. Specifically, I'll be looking at Time Out of Joint. I'm currently working on my podcast series on Time Out of Joint. I'll be doing about 5 episodes. I'll put the link to my podcast, which has all my other Philip K. Dick content and reviews there. But my next series I'm going to be working on is Time Out of Joint. So when that's done, I'll come back to make a YouTube video where I give my brief introduction to and my overall thoughts on Time Out of Joint. So thanks for watching.